So we're continuing on with our series. I'm doing Mark 4 out of 7. There's my hand motions for Bruce, Mark 4 out of 7. And so I'm using a text that was recommended for Mark 4, which is empowered servant leadership. Our text comes from the Gospel according to John, chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. I think I had you start at 2, but I'm going to start at 1. Listen now to the Word of God. Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already decided that Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, would betray Jesus. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from supper, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet and put on his robe and reclined again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, slaves are not greater than their master, nor the messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, as you know, these last several weeks we've been talking about vital congregations that make a difference, or as Webster defines it, it's congregations that are fundamentally concerned with or affecting life or living beings. Vital congregations tend to renew or refresh the living. They are full of life and vigor. That's Webster's definition. So for me lately, I have find it helpful to look at the opposite, the antonyms. So here's the opposite of what is a vital congregation. It's a dead one, an inactive one, an innate one, a lackadaisical one, a languid one, a lifeless one, a limp one, a spiritless one. I think that we can all agree that that is not who we want to be as a church or as a people of faith or as children of God. We want to be full of life and vigor. We want to be faithful. We want to be serving. And so today we move on in our marks, and we're looking at empowered servant leadership. And it's really kind of interesting because as we did this, I really focused in on servant leadership. And there's a whole nother sermon, as Bruce did, with empowering. How do we empower? How are you empowered? What do we need to do to empower? So as we look at the scripture, we'll see how it addresses this servant leadership. And it does also give us a clue how to empower leaders. You notice that our reading from John is the lectionary that we usually hear on Maundy, Thursday, the day that Jesus and his disciples gathered in the upper room to celebrate the Passover meal, or as we also call it, the Last Supper. The story is only recorded in John, and William Brosen says this: in other Gospels, Jesus serves, feeds, heals, and exercises. In John, Jesus strips, kneels, and washes, not himself, but his followers, and tells them to do the same for each other. In our story, after Jesus washes the disciples' feet, he asks them this penetrating question: do you know what I have done And I've added this, do you know what I have done for you? Do you know what I am doing? It is one of those questions that is not meant to have a quick response. And for once, the disciples get it. They have sense enough not to answer. Even Peter who shouts out and Peter who does everything, even Peter is quiet. I am not sure if they're still trying to understand what Jesus has just done, or they actually understood that what Jesus had just done was more than just the washing of the feet. Regardless, Jesus' question lingers in the air as their discomfort and uneasiness in having their leader, the one they look up to, the follow, called teacher and Lord, actually has come by and washed their dirty, callous feet. It is undeniable that more is going on than meets the eye, and they've been around Jesus long enough to know that that is going on. I believe that probably there is a tension just below the surface that is palatable. So they sit silently in their own thoughts, in their own grappling with what's going on, since they have arrived here in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. The reality is that the disciples probably needed to have their feet washed. That was the custom of the day. It was what you did. That was hospitality. And no one had offered or volunteered to do it. So Jesus gets up from the table and takes off his outer robe and ties a towel around his waist and proceeds to go about his task. He takes the water and it pours and it splashes. And I can only imagine what they're thinking as he comes around and he kneels and he bends and he takes their feet, he cradles them in his hands, and he does what a servant might do. Can only imagine what they're thinking. The act of washing the disciples' feet by Jesus sheds light on the nature of Jesus' love, and I think also is an example of what empowered servant leadership looks like. No one else had provided a service, so Jesus does it. Folks in the first century would have understood that this act is an act of humility and an act of service as well. The disciples could have never guessed or imagined that Jesus would model such a shocking act of disregard for social and cultural conventions. Their leader, the one whom they have observed teaching and healing and performing miracles, the one who walked on water, turned water into wine, raising Lazarus from the dead, the one who claims to be the Messiah, bending down, humbling himself, washing their feet, modeling for them the radically subservient love that his followers should express to one another. This is the kind of love that they are to show to the world. Incarnational love, love that the world longs for, needs, love that transforms and liberates and unites. And what I find even more striking about this parable, about this story, I guess it is a parable in some ways, it's not only does Jesus wash the feet of the disciples, the ones that he knows will follow and do perhaps what he wants, he also washes the feet of Judas, knowing fully well what Judas will do. We are to love friend and foe, follower and denier, those worthy and those unworthy. And that's the hard part about the gospel. I keep coming back to the question, do you know what I have done for you? Do you understand what it means to follow me? What a piercing question that goes right to the heart of what it means to be the follower of Jesus Christ. What it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might, and your neighbor as yourselves. We, the disciples, are asked to do nothing less than what the Lord has done for us. That's empowering servant leadership. Christian love is to emulate the love of Christ as we have can see for this passage that includes serving others, even to the extent that we will figuratively and literally, if we have to, get down on our hands and knees and wash each other's feet. Empowered servant leadership are marks of a congregation that are alive and full of vigor and vitality. And they continually lift up the question, I think, do you know what I have done for you? Not taking it for granted. Understanding that they are called to serve and not be served. To share in the mission of loving as Jesus loved. Empowered servant leadership has nothing to do with entitlement or self, and everything to do with compassion and empathy and the willingness to put others before yourself. It's counterintuitive to the world's understanding of what a strong, competent leader looks like. Henry Nouwen wrote this in his book, Bread for the Journey. Mostly we think of people with great authority as higher up, far away, and hard to reach. Think about the people with greater authority are higher up, far away, and hard to reach. But spiritual authority comes from compassion and emerges from deep inner solidarity with those who are subject to authority. The one who is fully like us, who deeply understands our joys and pains and hopes and desires, who is willing and able to walk with us, that is the one to whom we gladly give authority and whose subjects are willing to be. It is the compassionate authority that empowers, encourages, and calls for the hidden gifts and enables great things to happen. Let me say that again. It is the compassionate authority that empowers, encourages, and calls for the hidden gifts and enables great things to happen. True spiritual authorities are located in the point of an upside-down triangle, supporting and holding into the light everyone they offer their leadership to. We are called not to lord over one another or to think that we are somehow better than others or entitled or privileged or privileged. Rather, we are called to wash one another's feet. With these countless acts of humble service that we can offer on a daily basis. Putting others before ourselves, being kind and compassionate, doing for others instead of expecting others to do for us. Empowered servant leadership reminds us that we are to be aware of the needs of those around us. That's what I liked about natural church development? I love that. I mean, I think churches and organizations need to know that. And one of the natural church development things, which is an evangelism thing, a growth thing, it says, pay attention to the needs in your community. Because the needs of this community is going to be very different than the needs of the community at First Pres, or the needs of the community at maybe St. Martha's Catholic Church. Because we're in a different community and that we need to pay attention to the needs around us and serve those around us. Servant leadership reminds us that we are to love one another without expecting anything in return. Our denomination, I was very excited. I texted Kylie the other day and said our denomination, because she said we need to do confirmation class. And our denomination has come out with a new confirmation curriculum entitled Commission to Change the World. And it's under the Matthew 25 program initiative, which I still hope one day will become a Matthew 25 church. Again, that's a sermon for another time. Matthew 25 seeks to act boldly and compassionately to serve people who are hungry and oppressed and imprisoned and poor by showing God's love and justice and mercy. So they have this new curriculum coming out, which really caught my eye. And this is what one person wrote about it. This curriculum is revolutionary in its approach, recasting confirmation from the classic modality of preparing youth for church membership. And instead, it presupposes that confirmands are already church members by the virtue of their baptism, and it seeks to prepare them not for institutional membership, but for missional engagement in the world. So in other words, So here's their little, if you take nothing else, write this down. So I was at Monterey. I'm going to get you youth who are going to go Monterey, if any of them are listening, get ready, get out your phones and write this down. This is what you need to take from here. We are called to be the church, not just to join the church. We are called to be the church, not just to join the church. I wonder if we've forgotten that. I wonder if we, the church, have gotten so focused on our own survival. Look around. We're not the only church that looks like this on a Sunday morning. Have we gotten so focused on survival and our worthiness and making sure that we are politically correct and inoffensive as possible as not to offend or scare people off? Are we so wrapped up in what we need, what we desire, what we want, that we've forgotten what it means to love as we have been loved? I wonder if we've forgotten what it means to be the church. So I love the idea of this confirmation, because I can tell you, our kids, our youth do great things. And if we can prepare them to be missionally engaged within the world, they will continue to shed light. T. David Johnson writes this: in the washing of the disciples' feet, Jesus chooses to empty himself rather than to promote himself. This act of humble service and submission is the church's model of mission into the world, the means by which God's glory will be experienced by all who will follow after Jesus has gone to the Father. The genius of this strategy is that everyone can do it, whatever rank, whatever title, whatever gender, whatever race, all can serve. All can pick up the basin, all can take the cloth, and all can wash feet. This foot washing is more than a humble act of deference. It is a sermon to the world about how to love. Friends, our world needs this sermon. And the reality is, we need this sermon.